so we ended up moving up. And I went to this masjid, where it was right down the street, and I went there a couple times, maybe 2 or 3 times at most. And one day one Friday in Juma, I was in there, and these 2 African brothers came in. And you might be wondering why I keep using the word African. I never use the word Negro. That's a misnomer for me. That's like not even existent. You can't take an orange from Florida and plant it in Canada and call it an apple, you know. It doesn't work that way. So anyway, as I said, Trinidad is made up of Africans and Indians. And unfortunately, it saddens me to say that. When I went in the masjid, these 2 brothers come in. I guess they came in to do the salah and whatever. And some conversation there was some Indian brothers right next to me, a little ways away from me, maybe 2 or 3 feet, you know. And they were talking about something, you know, like whatever it was. I don't really know what it was, but they were looking at me as if to say. What I did hear was one of them say, "Well, you know how them is, you know." And they're looking at me. So I said, "How are they at? Well, you know, what are you talking about?" And well, you know how them people stay. When he says that, I looked at, I stopped myself. I didn't even try to do salah that day. I walked out of the masjid that day, and I never went back. Anyway,
that's what I wanted to mention, because it's a very powerful story. How Muslims can repel people from Islam. We have to make sure that we are Muslims at all times and doing what is right, because the last thing you want to do is be somebody who repel someone away from you with your racism, your colorism, or your classism, right, or whatever ism it is, right?
But apart from
somebody you don't even know, he looks like me, so he thinks like
right. Right. Exactly. That was the whole dynamic of the story. That's what was the dynamic. But apart from just being a Muslim, and you don't want to be a Muslim and be like, recently I went to a meeting and I asked the people who were there if Muslims can be racist. And immediately one African brother rise up and say, "Oh, no, Islam is we don't have no racism in Islam." And my answer was like, "Well, I didn't ask about Islam, I asked about Muslims." But he thought, one of the other brothers thought I was being a little bit rude. I know that because I watched him and he looked at me and the adhan went off and he was like, I'm a suspicious person when people behave a certain kind of way. And I'm sure people are suspicious about me if I behave that kind of way too. I'm not, But anyway, the question that I asked was not about Islam. Because at that point, and that was just recently, that was, a year ago or something? And at that point, I had already come through all of this life to bring me to that point where I asked that question. You know what I'm saying? And not that I wanted to be a Muslim or I wanted to belong to Islam, because I belong there already. I've been in that for all my life. I just wasn't saying Islam, or I just wasn't saying Muslim. So anyway, going backward a little bit, after that incident in the masjid, I was like, I just put my life on the line, and I fight against oppression and racism and this kind of thing and that kind of thing. And here I am in the thing that attracted me. I walked right into that again. This thing is not, this thing ain't going the way I'm hoping it. So that brother had come from Boston, and his name is Michael Wolf. And he played in a operatic series or play called Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh yeah?
And he played the role of Jesus Christ.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And
African brother.
Yeah, African brother, and he had dreadlocks. I'm serious. This is history, and if he's looking at this, if he sees this, he's gonna smile. Because that had an impact on a lot of youngsters.
Right.
He may not think that right now. I don't know what he thinks right now. I haven't seen him in years. I know he's a musician in Boston. I mean, he's a friend on my Facebook page. You know what I'm saying? So
I'll make sure I send it to you so he sees this.
yeah, I said.
How long you said was that 19?
I would have been about 76, maybe.
And he played African with dreadlocks.
Yeah. And he's super black. He's really dark skin. He's not, and he's from my village too, a village called Faizabad, which is a village, name of a village in Pakistan called Faizarabad. And it's a whole other set of history I didn't explain here, and I would not do it here because it's just going to be too long. You know, so anyway, this brother had bought some books at the time, and so we all began reading, and the whole Rasta thing just come into being. And I lived the rest of part of my life as, you know, I remember at one point we all burnt our European clothes. This is no joke. All the village youth burnt all our pants and shoes and socks and t-shirts and blah, blah, blah. And we put on sackcloth, with burlap bag, right? And people thought we were going crazy. Because here you have 30, 40 youths just walking around the village in burlap, talking about the Bible and Jesus Christ and whatever have you, and he was, you know. So the whole idea of my journey, as you say, or my trip in Islam was not just taking Shahada and now trying to understand what Islam is. We were involuntarily being guided. And I would say involuntary because we didn't know that I didn't know that I was being guided to where I am today. And over the years, being in the Rastafari concept of living has taught me a whole lot about religiosity and understanding what Christianity is and understanding parts of the Bible. Then I understood, well, that was the direction that Moses traveled before he went across the water. And then I understand what the Queen of Sheba. I'm starting to understand the history of the culture itself. And I found that when Ethiopia claimed the Queen of Sheba, right? But the Muslims actually claimed it as well. The people in Yemen claimed it as well. So there's a conflict of interest here that started happening because, they call that place Saba. And there was this queen they talked about. And then in Ethiopia she was called Makeda. And she ruled Abyssinia from Aksum. And the story goes that she went to visit Solomon. But nowhere in that story that she goes to visit Solomon says she crossed over any water. So how can the Ethiopians claim that she was ruling from Aksum? And how can the Muslims claim that this place that she was from, Saba, she made it to Jerusalem to see Solomon? And so the question kind of pop up in my mind, well, if Adam was supposedly, and the thing is, nobody wants to talk about this openly. Like Adam was a black man because Allah created him out of dirt. And naturally, dirt is dark.
Right. It's a black mud, black clay specific.
Yeah, so he did that, but somehow biblical theology creates him as white, being a white, of European descent. So you see how it changes its perspective. And then if Adam is white and all the prophets are white, then Solomon is white.
Yeah.
So he married a black woman, which is now, that black woman would have been the Queen of Sheba, or supposedly, because she's Ethiopian.
Right.
But the Queen of Saba wouldn't have been Ethiopian. She would have been something else. So it's a mixed up story that we were getting, not really a full historical story, or that's filled with historical evidence, timelines, date lines. But when you start reading, when you start looking at that history from the Ethiopian point of view, you start seeing something different. You start understanding, well, Aksum is actually in Abyssinia, right? So how did she get across the water when there's no mention of her crossing the water anywhere? Going or coming. You see what I'm saying? But they missed it. Either they deliberately missed out, left that out, or they just didn't think it was important. But she ruled from Aksum, which is on this side of the Red Sea, right? And Saba is on that side of the Red Sea. All right? So it's funny though. It's funny. It's kind of funny, like how nobody talks about that, you know. So she ruled from Aksum, which is on this side in the mountains, and she went to see Solomon. There's no mention of her crossing the water, but she somehow get to Jerusalem. And I think crossing the Red Sea would have been a major event in her getting to Jerusalem. But anyway, that's how the story goes. They left it out for whatever reason. I'm not privy to that. But
you know, there's evidence that she ruled Yemen across the water. So she ruled the entire area because they didn't see a difference between Africa.
There is no difference because that is part of Africa.
And Arabia.
Arabia is part of Africa, but that's a story for another time.
Right.
My opinion on that is not necessarily Islamic. You know what I'm saying?
It doesn't have to do with it's geography. It's
well, besides being geography,
there's
some history involved in that which would be frowned upon by a lot of, that my opinion on that would be frowned upon by a lot of scholarly people, who's versed in Islamic, whatever you want to call it. But like I say, as the trip as the Rasta trip went on, I became more and more involved in it because of its revolutionary perspective. And after having read all of these speeches by Haile Selassie, I loved them. It meant the world to me. It spoke to things that I believe, and which I still believe today. It spoke to that, and I'm not going to let that go. I'm not going to change. I don't care who says what. You know what I'm saying? So all of the things that happened prior to that was like, I had to come through that whole idea. Like I said, I'm not just a Muslim who takes Shahada, who just beginning to experience Islam. Most people I think, who become Muslim or invited to Islam have to, they're invited, some of them love it, they have, I don't have any emotional, make you come to tears, kind of empathy to Islam. I don't have one of those where you tell you about your journey to Islam and you start crying. I don't have one, I really don't know how to do that, because honestly, to me, that's fake, you know. It's trying to make people believe, well, it's so, it's so holier than thou, you know, and it's not, really. For me, it has not been that. I have never had that moment where I can say, oh, you know, I don't have that kind of, I don't have that. I don't feel that it's necessary to have that.
So what did you have?
I just have life, man. I just live, you know. I don't have.
What prompted you to take the Shahada again?
Because I reached to a point in the Rastafari traditional values that one set of things did not make sense to me. And it dawned on me that I was being a hypocrite. You know what I'm saying? By saying it meant something to me, but it really didn't, because I don't see that. I don't see Haile Selassie as God. And he didn't create the earth. He can't have created it when he prayed to God himself. So that started me questioning, how does God pray to himself? You know, how does he bend down and touch the ground with his face and fall on the ground? How does he do that? How does God do that? And the same thing went on with Jesus Christ. The same idea went on for me with, I was like, but all the other stuff, all the other fight for it against injustice and equal rights and repatriation for Africans to go to, all of that is still relevant.
Absolutely.
You understand what I'm saying? I would not give that. I would still join the fight for repatriation. I would still join the fight for, you know what I'm saying? I'd still be in that fight. I'm not going to change that. I would still be in the fight for propagating certain things, certain ideological parts of Rastafari. That's not going to change. But certain things is not making sense. So, like I said, I had to come through that in order to, and I know brothers who know me for 45, for 50 years and hear me say that, no, their jaw would drop. I'm really not being a hypocrite I'm actually confessing to you that I was being a hypocrite by propagating something that was not true, or is not true. Not in its entirety, but certain, because how can you, as a black person of African descent, I'm not talking about Indians, I'm talking about Africans, how can you, as a person of African descent, talk about oppression and the fight against oppression and still open the King James Version of the Bible, who is the major contributor to your oppression, and quote stuff out of that which you know has been changed and you know has been tampered with? How can you, in all good conscience, do that? How could I, in all good conscience, believe and do that? You know what I'm saying? So something has to give somewhere.
One thing I would say is, I wouldn't say you're a hypocrite. I was saying that you're sincere, and your sincerity makes you change.
Well, some people would disagree with you.
If you continue to do it, then you would be a hypocrite. If you knew it was wrong, and continue. That's because a hypocrite basically is a liar in action.
Yeah. So what made me take the Shahada again? I got to a point in my life where I just had given too much. I had given away almost everything that I owned, everything that I had. I keep helping people and with no help coming back. And then I got majorly sick, you know, and I thought I was going to die, really. And that kind of opened up my, you know, I got to give somewhere. And since that, I've been having issues all the time. And then I realized I'm almost at the end of my life, you know.
Mhm.
So